parents. They seem to be in such a major. Welcome to the BMore podcast. I'm your host, Erica Kane. Today's guest is not only an educator, a mother, and a community servant, but has permanently become threaded into the fabric of Baltimore and Baltimore's history, becoming the first African-American woman to serve as president of the city council, becoming Baltimore's first female mayor, becoming Baltimore's third black mayor, and serving as the 48th mayor of Baltimore, and currently gearing up for the 2024 election in hopes of becoming Baltimore's mayor yet again. Please welcome Sheila Dixon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking your time out of your schedule. We're honored to have you and have a good conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, indeed. Glad that you're here. So with these podcasts, we're going to talk about the election and everything, but I'd like to start at the beginning. I think people feel like they know Sheila Dixon, but there's a lot that people probably don't know.
There is a whole lot that people don't know.
Okay. So we want to talk about you as a person. You were raised in Baltimore City, Ashburton neighborhood.
I was raised in Baltimore, on the west side of Baltimore. Most of my childhood after living two other places, I've lived in the Forest Park area, and then we bought a house in the Ashburton community.
Yeah. Ashburton itself has a complex history.
It does.
There's so many notable names that come from the Ashburton area. Catherine Pugh, former mayors like Kurt Schmoke, Lisa Gladden.
Well, keep in mind, Catherine Pugh, she's not from Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
So she's from Philly.
And then made it over to
So she married
Ashburton.
somebody, but when you talk about Kurt Schmoke, but there are Delegate Pete Rollins, Stephanie Rollins-Blake grew up in Ashburton. A number of our well-known ministers used to live in Ashburton many years ago. Reverend Carter, who's passed, Bishop Bryant, Bishop Reed. So I could probably go through a whole list.
Yeah.
But Ashburton, when I grew up in the area as a child, it was a mix with Jewish and African Americans.
Now, before that, in the 1920s, Ashburton was strictly white and Christian, specifically. And then, of course, there were some legalities that came into play that helped integrate the neighborhood. And in the 1930s and 40s, like you said, Jewish residents. And then by the 1950s and 60s, it was predominantly African American.
Yeah, because when I was young, it was probably Catholic and Jewish, and growing up, and then it became more middle class African Americans. Oh yeah, Reverend Dobson, who just celebrated. They had a 100th year celebration at Union Baptist. His family lived down in the first block of Cedardale, where I grew up.
I was told. And does Ben Jealous have a connection to Ashburton as well?
He might. I don't know.
Okay, I was told that too. It's like a lot of names scattered into the Ashburton fabric. So. I want to talk about it because just to hear you growing up at that time, any memories or things that you remember about growing up in the neighborhood at that time?
So the things that I remember about growing up in the area, there was these little pathways where you could kind of take shortcuts because the blocks were long. And as a young person, you did a lot of walking, probably more miles than the average child walks today. And one way of taking a shortcut through the different neighborhoods is you would take that pathway. And, I just remember going through the pathway, always taking shortcuts. But, just playing in the neighborhood, getting to know your neighbors, riding my bike. I've been a biker way before it was very popular. I remember I met my first boyfriend. I had a hernia operation at the North Charles Hospital on Charles Street, and the nurse at the hospital who was helping me, she said she had a son, and they lived 3 blocks away, and we ended up, it wasn't serious, but I got a ride every day to school up to Northwestern, so that was the benefit of that boyfriend.
Okay. I'm not mad at it.
But the one thing that I don't share much about is that just going down to Hanlon Park. I also used to do a lot of running. And the other thing that I did leaving, because I forgot what bus, I think it was a 35, I don't remember, but I caught a lot of buses in the area. But I used to hitchhike. And I think about that today.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
thing. I can, or,
Hitchhike.
What's the term?
Not trying to get a hack or any of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Oh, no,
okay.
you had to go to
Okay.
McDonald's for a hack. I mean, literally hitchhiking.
Okay.
And I think about that, and I was like, wow.
You made it through because that wasn't necessarily the safest, or did you
Well,
feel safer at
actually-
that time?
Oh,
doing
clearly. Yeah, I felt safe. I mean, yes, I did. I felt safer then. That's why I think about the fact that I even had the nerve to hitchhike.
that? Yeah. That's
know?
different times.
Clearly, and the population was larger
Yeah.
than it is today. We had close to 1 million people in Baltimore City.
Yeah. More of a neighborhood vibe, I'm sure, than now. So you let me know what I'm correct on. Your father, Philip, was a car salesman?
Yep.
Okay. Your
Yes.
mom, Winona, she was a community activist?
She was a community activist. My mother waited until we entered school before she then went into the workforce. And then she got her associate degree at community college, and then she started working in the school system as a parent liaison. And which actually parent liaison workers are needed more today than ever. And she was in some really rough areas, but she would conduct workshops for parents of the students in the school. She would do home visits, everything. She would be down at Lexington Terrace, in the high rise at that time before they were torn down. She also worked out at Cherry Hill. And the interesting thing about it, my mother didn't never drive. She never, and as much as we encouraged her to get her driver's license, she never drove. She would catch the bus, or if my father wasn't working, he would drive. That's the one thing I wanted to do, and we learned in school was take driver's ed so I could learn how to drive.
Married to a car salesman, but would not get a car?
Nope.
Okay.
And didn't want to drive.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. She just didn't. She retired when my daughter, who was the first baby born to someone on the city council, no other women, most women who were on the council, which was few, had their children before getting into politics. I actually had delivered my daughter while on the city council. Yeah.
So what was it like having a community activist in the home?
Well, what it did for me in particular was, because my mother was involved in the Girl Scouts, the Bluebirds, she was involved in our schools. What it did was it instilled in me and my sisters and brothers just being involved and giving back to the community.
Right.
I mean, that's where a lot of my drive that I have for the community comes from my mom.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was an artist and community activist as well. I feel like as a kid, you find you're toting along. You have to go to a lot of these places. You find yourself at, Jesse Jackson, Rainbow Coalitions and community awareness, different places that like usually kids aren't.
Right.
Right? But you're there tagging along with mom. And I think whether you realize it at the time or not, it is instilling something.
No,
in
it
you.
is. It is. My mother was involved in a lot of women issues. Actually, I grew up at St. Mary's Episcopal Church, which is in Walbrook Junction. I grew up Episcopal. My mother was on her side of the family Episcopal. My father was Catholic. But she actually was involved in a lot of women organizations. And then she ended up actually coming to Bethel, where I ended up going and being active at Bethel AME Church with the women's ministry and other organizations.
Yeah. So you grew up in Baltimore City Public Schools. I know the current state of Baltimore City Public Schools, it makes headlines often. You graduated from Northwestern. Seeing the current state of the public school system now, what are the major differences that you see between now and when you were a student attending?
Well, number one, the population today is a lot smaller than the population of Baltimore City Public Schools back when I was in school.
Okay.
We had close to 1,000 students at our school. One year, we had to end up going on shifts. That's why a lot of our high schools were so large. And now, because of the reduction of population, schools have changed. But I think the difference is that we were exposed to so much more. When I was in high school, physical education, you were exposed to gymnastics, basketball, baseball, tennis, rifle, archery. You were exposed to so many things, and then you kind of found out what your niche was. And
Yeah.
mine was dancing, and of course, I wanted to be a cheerleader. And I was in the drama club. Kids today, they don't even have physical ed, a lot of them. This was required. We had swimming.
Yeah.
You couldn't even graduate from high school
And not
unless
know
you
how to
knew how to
swim.
swim.
Right.
And most of our high schools had swimming pools, or you had track, but you were exposed to so much, and then you kind of found your niche. And I think today we had art. It's just we were exposed to so much, and it seems like today kids are just missing so many other opportunities to express who they are and deal with some of the challenges that they face. And
Yeah.
I just believe that physical education, art, music, that's the other thing. We had music that we were exposed to. I can think back when, this might have been elementary schools, where we learned how to play the flute. And then you kind of determine what other instrument you might want to get involved in.
Yeah, yeah.
But what do they have today?
Yeah.
And parents were very involved and engaged. And the camaraderie that you had with your classmates, even when you competed against other schools, it was a friendly competition. It wasn't violent. You didn't have to worry about somebody bringing in a gun. If you had a fight, and there were fights, people fought it out, and then they were friends.
Yeah.
Now you got to worry about your life in
Yeah.
school.
People bringing guns to school
Yeah.
and different things.
And then the quality, and I'm not saying that, and now they have more resources to be able to do more than what we had back when I was in school.
Yeah. And so you talk about 1,000 students in one school.
Yeah.
What was the teacher to student ratio looking like, and how were the teachers handling large numbers like
The
that?
teacher to student ratio in high school, I think I had like 1,000 kids in junior high. Probably it was around, I'm going to say 25, 30
Okay.
students. Yeah.
Okay.
But we learned.
Yeah.
And, we were very focused, and most of us had a plan. We knew what we wanted to do, so we were working towards that goal. I knew, because I had a bad experience in elementary school with a teacher, that I wanted to teach because I wanted to make sure that no child had to go through a teacher being negative towards them.
Yeah.
And so, but most of us had plans, even if you weren't going to go to college. If you went into vocational ed or the military or into the business, the public sector, the private sector, you had a plan, so you knew what you wanted to do.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so you graduated from high school. You got your bachelor's at Towson. Why did you choose Towson U?
Because they gave me money.
Okay. Fair enough. Scholarship spoke, yeah.
Yeah. I filled out the Pell Grant. I got scholarships and money, and Towson gave me money.
Okay.
That's kind of, I didn't have, my parents couldn't afford to send us to college.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to go, and I was following my sister's footsteps, and that's who gave me money.
Yeah. And then-
Towson is even different today. Back then, we were in a minority. There were a lot of challenges, but having a strong black student union and having really great advisors was extremely helpful. And the fact that my sister, who was an upperclassman, was also able to help to guide me. And I did work study. I worked in the library. And then I just think about all the jobs I had. And I also taught karate at Recreation and Parks when I was in college. And that's when, and I didn't have a car, so I used to have to take like 3 buses out to Towson, and you had to live in a certain area before you could stay on campus. So I was not in the radius of the miles, so I had to commute. And that's when I was hitchhiking too, because taking 3 buses to get out there. But I finally did end up getting a car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I got my first car from an auction.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a Crown Victorian. It was like an unmarked looks like an unmarked police car.
Right.
People used to break the windows because they thought it was a police car.
How much did you pay for it? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember.
So you talk about the Black Student Union and how important that was to you. On this show, we've had, different guests from so many different backgrounds, races, cultures, and a lot of them speak on how finding a particular student union that represented them was so important to them. Just kind of mending things together, even from childhood, from growing up and kind of feeling out of place or being somewhere where you feel out of place, and just coming together with a group of people that make you feel like at home or make you recognize things about yourself.
When I was in college, it was a really challenging time, and race, more so than anything else, was a huge issue on college campuses.
Yeah.
And so to have that support and to be able to deal with some of the challenges at a white institution, it just helped to get through that and,
Yeah.
and to deal with that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So you graduate and you become a teacher, correct?
Well, actually, when I graduated from Towson, we were going through a recession and jobs were hard to find. So I actually ended up working at the water department for Baltimore City. And at the time, they had files of accounts that we had to monitor, or I don't even remember the details. All I know is I am not doing this for much longer.
Yeah.
But finally, where I ended up student teaching at Stewart Hill Elementary, which was an open space school, one of the first in Baltimore, in Pigtown, I ended up getting a job there teaching kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was this before or after your studies at Johns Hopkins?
This was before.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because you, getting your master's at Johns Hopkins, a rigorous program, I would imagine, and I could imagine what your experience was like there at Johns Hopkins.
At Hopkins, the graduate program, it was a lot different than undergrad, because most people in graduate school are either working or very focused. And so at Hopkins, it was not to the extreme that it was at Towson. And the fact that, I had another job, and there were other individuals within the class and the program that were, working full-time. Some had families. At that time, I didn't. So it was a little different at Hopkins than it was at Towson.
Yeah. And you eventually worked with the Head Start program?
Well, actually, as a teacher, at that time, you were paid a 10-month period. And I want to say my salary back then might have been early 20s, like $21,000 a year. Might have been less than that. You had to have a part-time job. I actually taught parents GED at St. Bernardine's in the evening when I got off from teaching.
Okay.
But before that, I was actually teaching in alternative ed. I worked for the Baltimore Prep, where kids couldn't make it in the regular schools, and this is young people. And it was actually an excellent program. It was federally funded, and we actually worked with young people who couldn't make it in the regular public schools, who had a lot of challenges. But this program, I taught pre-GED and GED, and they also had intense therapy, and they also worked. To this day, two of my members of Bethel Church, one still has the same job that he had 40-some years ago, working for the state.
Wow.
Yep.
So you worked in education about how long?
I worked in education for about 10 years, maybe 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. But while teaching, Baltimore is very interesting to work, particularly in education. While teaching, I had a great group of senior teachers who really helped me through the process to understand what I needed to do. But an opportunity opened itself, because I've never been a person that focused on one area. I'll do multiple things at one time.
Okay.
And at that time, one summer I went on a women's mission to Kenya, and with Cecilia Bryant, Jamal Bryant's mother,
Okay.
who was the first lady at Bethel. And during that time, two of my friends and I, we actually ended up doing an import-export business. So I was doing that, I was teaching and working with St. Bernardines. And I really got interested in international business. And the opportunity came from Delegate Pete Rollins, where the state opened an international program. And I ended up leaving teaching to go and work in Department of Business and Economic Development in the international arena. And actually, I got certified at the School of Thunderbird, and I worked actually for the state for 17 years.
Right. So you were a international trade specialist. Okay.
And actually, I was just throwing away some boxes the other day because sometimes I hold on to things too long.
Like,
and I
what is
found
this?
one of my business cards for the state said senior trade specialist. But I used to travel and throughout the state of Maryland, particularly Eastern Shore, Frederick County, and Montgomery and Prince George's County were the areas where I worked with companies to share with them services and resources to take their companies overseas.
Okay.
And I did that on top of, then I also was in the city council.
Basically, you're analyzing foreign trade,
So,
global
no,
economy, and
what I did was, my job was to attract businesses to see whether or not their product or service or their technology could potentially be sold overseas.
Okay.
And so we identified markets overseas.
Okay.
To try to get those companies to export their product overseas. So we attended a lot of trade shows. We did a lot of trade missions. And we had certain territories statewide as well as internationally. And Africa was my territory,
Okay.
along with the Caribbean and Canada. So the goal was how we can get companies here in Maryland to do business in those countries. And I had others who had Europe. We had South America, and then China, where we were doing things for the state. It was a huge program. Governor Hughes established the program. Governor Schaefer actually extended it, expanded. And Glendenning really took it to another level because we've done trade missions. And then things had kind of died off under the O'Malley administration somewhat about the international. But you'd be surprised what opportunities and the infrastructure here that we have. We have the port, but the infrastructure of companies that are here
Yeah.
at all stages. Produced chicken was exported to China and other places overseas. Different technology from the University of Maryland, but I really enjoyed it immensely. I opened up the first office in South Africa, and we took a number of trade missions over to South Africa where companies actually not only did business but actually opened up businesses in parts of South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah.
So already multifaceted, and then in '86 you're elected to the Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee, representing the 40th Legislative District. And in '87 you won a seat on the Baltimore City Council, representing the 4th Council District, where you served 12 years. So you explained, I guess, how that jump or transition into office, because coming from, I guess, being an international trade specialist, but it was a program that was kind of all tied together government-wise.
So actually, no, it was education. It was education that kind of pushed me in the direction to go. Well, first of all, Delegate Pete Rollins, who represented the 40th, which is now Antonio Hayes' district, asked me to, I was helping him and others out on a campaign, and I headed up their phone bank, and then I ended up doing, being a volunteer coordinator. And so he asked me to be on the State Central Committee, and that's when I got really involved with what that meant. And I became a delegate for Jesse Jackson when he ran for president.
Okay.
And then my mother actually is the one who introduced me to Kwaisi Mfume, who she got to know. She worked on his campaign. And then he recommended me when he won to fill out his seat, his term. And there's a process that you go through. and I ended up not getting, which I knew I wasn't because it's very political, but I ended up running for the seat. But the main focus was education, because when I was teaching, I had some students who were above grade average, and I wanted to have them go and sit in the first and second grade classes to deal with the academics, but socially they needed to still be in the kindergarten. And I caught hell trying to get them to be moved up for math and reading.
Okay.
I ended up, because you get to know teachers, I used to sneak them up there to do it. But that, and also some of the other political things that were happening in the schools, I decided that when I was asked to get involved in politics at that time, that's where I wanted to focus. How could I make changes in the education system for our children? And as an elected official, what could I do to make an impact to change policy?
Okay. So education is what drove
That's
you.
what drove me, yeah.
Okay, all right. And at that time, I don't know if you saw yourself being just many of the firsts that you were about to accomplish.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. In '99, you're elected president of the Baltimore City Council, the first African-American woman elected to this position. You won your re-election race in 2003, defeating Catherine Pugh by 21,000 votes. What was that experience like for you? And what obstacles do you feel like you faced, if any, being the first Black woman to take that position?
So one of the things that Mayor Duburn's shared with me, I remember when I was running for city council, he said, whatever I do, learn city government. He said, he was the city council president before Governor Schaefer won, and then he was the mayor until him and Kirk Schmoke ran against each other. But he told me to learn city government and understand how city government operates. He said, because you can get up on Monday nights and make those flowery speeches. And so my goal was, one, learning city government, understanding how it operates, but also how to empower. Because the 4th District at that time, and even now, but it's now several districts, had a lot of challenges. And for me, it was, how do I help to empower the citizens to realize that we work for them. It's not the other way around. And that what they want and need is how we should be operating in our positions. And so I had some opposition as far as, it was still predominantly white males within the council, and even in the business community where, I had my challenges. But people began to learn that I knew city government, and I was very responsive, and I listened. And people began to respect that. They said, okay, she's just not here just to have a seat, but she's actually, and I worked hard.
Yeah.
I worked extremely hard.
Here for the people. You mentioned some of the challenges that the 4th District had at that time and even now. What were some of those challenges?
We lost a large percentage of middle-class African Americans, and a lot of our seniors who died, and of course left their homes to their families, ended up leaving the properties vacant. So you could see where vacant properties were really growing at the time, and no one was responding to constituent issues that impact neighborhoods.
Okay.
Crime, drugs. It wasn't as violent, even though we had all this going on.
Okay.
But so those were some of the biggest challenges. And probably out of the 6 districts at the time, probably the 4th, the 6th, and the part of East Baltimore probably were the poorest areas. And so, there was a number of challenges trying to help folks to empower themselves.
Yeah.
That was been always the goal. How do we empower you to take your life and get it in the right path?
Okay. So now 2006 comes along. Martin O'Malley is serving as the Democratic mayor of Baltimore. He became mayor the same year that you took office for the Baltimore City Council in '99. So now 2006, O'Malley runs for governor of Maryland and wins, so he has to resign, and you ascend to mayoral position. With you being the current, at the time, city council president. Talk about, I guess, some big shoes to fill, right?
So it was big shoes to fill, but I had to go back to Mayor Duburn's and what he told me and about learning and knowing city government.
Yeah.
And so I had a good handle on how city government needed to operate.
Okay.
And how to move through the system to get things done. And as it relates to constituents, Mary Pat Clark was really my mentor because she was, very active and responsive to communities. And so where I saw challenges that the city was facing, I knew that I needed to pull together a good team of people and focus on those challenges.
Okay.
And at that time, crime was, well, we were at 300. And I knew that violent crime was one of the issues in the city. Cleaning the city was important to me. I'm obsessed with making sure the city's clean, and so understanding that we had a very unhealthy city,
Yeah.
people, and with all the renowned hospitals. So I wanted to really come up with a plan to figure out how city government could be engaged and involved in making the city healthier.
Yeah.
And then, of course, dealing with the environment. So goal was, how do we focus on getting a crime plan that can be effective and really make change in a way that we haven't? How can we also deal with systemic issues that affect, so we can break some cycles?
Yeah.
And how we can clean up and make sure city government is operating effectively and efficiently. And during the time when O'Malley became governor and I became mayor, we were going through a recession. So the money was not there.
Okay.
And so we had to be very creative of how am I going to do all these things with very little. And I pulled together a good team of people that really helped in that process.
Yeah. In terms of popularity, because it sounds like you were really focused on the job at hand and the matters at hand and things that needed to be addressed. Was it intimidating with O'Malley? He's everywhere. He's so popular. He's named Best Young Mayor in the City by Esquire, Time Magazine, being recognized by all of these publications. And now here comes Sheila Dixon, who's a woman. Baltimore has never had a woman serving as a mayor. Baltimore has never had a black woman serving as a mayor. Was the pressure palpable in any way?
No, it wasn't. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I kind of grew up in city government, from being on the city council, then city council president, that I knew here was my opportunity. Even city council president, O'Malley and I didn't always agree, but we were able to work through some things. And so even as city council president, I was able to get things done.
Yeah.
And so this just allowed me to get even more things done that I knew had to happen for the citizens of Baltimore.
Yeah.
So it wasn't intimidating. It just was. I had to figure out, which I had to do anyway, because I had my daughter and then my son while I was on the city council, how to make sure that I balance my life and juggle a family along with, having my own little space, and so, making sure I incorporated all of that.
Yeah, how did that affect family?
So my daughter, when I became mayor, Jasmine was graduating from high school, going to college in New York. So she was living her life.
Okay.
My son was going into high school, so he was there with me, and I also went through a divorce. Because my husband, he didn't want me to become mayor. He didn't want me to become city council president. He just said be city council, but that's never none of that.
Was it just because he wanted you to be home, or was he worried about some of the dangers involved, or?
No, none of that. I just think that it puts more. It takes away your private life even more. As a city council person, yeah, but as city council president and mayor, we divorced when I think I was city council president at that point. So, just the limelight and being out there.
Yeah.
I took care of the household. I prepared 90% of the meals because I did not believe in eating out, except on the weekends. I had my kids on a schedule. I even had him on a schedule. He just didn't realize it. I handled the uniforms. I mean, I did a lot of that, and did
And
my
handle
job.
the office.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Even though he said he didn't want to be Mr. Mom, he wasn't Mr. Mom, but he was very active and involved with the children anyway.
okay.
Activities that they were involved in, and the regular things that parents supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like we never missed PTA meetings. He was active in their schools, and
Okay.
so he wasn't a Mr. Mom, even though he made that very clear. I don't want to be a Mr. Mom.
Right. Or publicly seen as, or
Well, he had been involved in the political arena before I even knew him. He worked under the Schaefer administration out of undergrad school.
Okay.
From Morgan. Actually, him and Catherine Pugh graduated together, and they worked at City Hall with Mayor Schaefer. So
Okay.
he had been involved in the political process.
okay.
Yeah,
It can be hard. It can take its toll.
it can.
Personally, it can. You got down to business. You introduced a crime bill that focused more on community policing. You brought in Police Commissioner Fred Bielfeld, who supported your strategies. And so, on record, by 2008, Baltimore City police reported a sharp decline in homicides. After just reaching record highs the year before, but some of the lowest numbers seen in 30 years.
We created Safe Streets, but it was a different type of Safe Streets at the time.
How so?
Well, Safe Streets came out of Chicago called Ceasefire.
Okay.
Actually, Senator Antonio Hayes, who was assistant deputy mayor for me at the time, who public safety, he went there and found Safe Streets. We, before deciding on the Safe Streets workers, we put them through an intense therapy, training. We monitored individuals, because you're talking about folks that were part of the community, part of the crime. We try to identify folks from that community, and their whole focus was being out there day and night to hear their ears to the ground about incidents that might be coming up, and that if they can do anything to eliminate it before the police even got involved. And so we start on a small scale.
Okay.
Because we had less money than they have now. So, and the intensity of what we put individuals through to be a part of it is a lot different than what goes on now. Because I've run into some former Safe Streets individuals who told me it was different. And Cherry Hill's a prime example. A Cherry Hill crime during that time, there was not one murder in Cherry Hill, because the people from Cherry Hill actually ran the program. And then, of course, we had people who were monitoring it and making sure, but it was constant training, making sure that they were getting therapy, because they had challenges in their lives.
Okay. I was going to ask you to elaborate on that part when you said therapy and therapy training, but that's understood. Now, I mentioned O'Malley and his rock star status at the time, which you were not intimidated by because you got down to business. But now it's time for you to run an election for full term as a mayor. And by that time, you had become a star in your own right. You were pretty heavily endorsed by a lot of people, including Governor Martin O'Malley, Peter Franchot, Kwesi Mfume, the list goes on, the Baltimore African American. In your first inaugural address as mayor, you stated, "I want you to know that I am much more than a newspaper headline or a soundbite on the evening news." Can you explain that quote in detail?
So, that I'm very committed to the job and committed to the citizens of Baltimore, and I don't want to make promises that I can't figure out how to keep.
Okay.
That people also at that time, but even before then, because you have to understand there are like a couple chapters that are not connected. Chapters of when we went through redistricting, twice when I was on the city council. The first was to increase African American representation.
Okay.
And we had a really intense situation on the floor of the council where a white council person knew that they were going to be losing their seat. And, when people lose power, they tend to show themselves.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of dirty, underhanded things going on. And matter of fact, in our community, don't talk about people's moms, right? Okay. So I'm helping Carl Stokes out because somebody's talking about calling people names, and I take my shoe off. and the cameras are on me, but I didn't take my shoe off to bang it on the table to say the shoe's on the other foot. I took my shoe off because I was going to hit that councilman. And then I ended up banging it on the table. Michael Oleska wrote the article about me being a racist and the fact that, the shoe was on the other foot.
Right.
I've never been a racist, but that's how people perceive me, particularly in the white community, particularly elected officials. So when I went to run for the next highest office, they were hesitant because people in the business community said, oh, she's a racist.
Okay.
So I had to end up proving that, anytime I can represent Hamden, and I don't know if you're from Baltimore, but when Hamden was in 4 districts and during the redistricting, it ended up being the 4th. Those folks in Hamden made it very clear. They said it to us. Agnes Welch, Sheila Dixon, and Lawrence Bell, we don't want no black people representing us. And I ended up representing them just as well as I represented the rest of my constituent. So I had to overcome the shoe because people labeled it as being a racist. But it wasn't about that. It was about equity, real equity.
Okay.
The fact that you have districts in the northeast part of Baltimore that was growing, middle-class African-Americans, and you still had 3 white males representing them. Cherry Hill, which was a predominantly black area, Westport, Cherry Hill, Wyman's Park, Curtis Bay, and you had 3 older white males representing them.
Yeah.
So our goal was, how can we increase representation to look like those communities? So all of that, people, when they saw me, that's what they were thinking about, the shoe. And she's a racist.
The infamous shoe wagon.
Yeah.
So the infamous shoe wagon was misinterpreted, you feel, to
Oh,
support
I know
a
it
particular
was, and I
storyline.
told the story to the Sun reporter, but, I never really get too much love out of the Sun.
Okay.
But it's all good.
Okay. So in 2008, you're at the height of your career at this time, first African-American woman mayor of Baltimore. Many say that role comes with the target. So in 2008, investigators from the Office of the State Prosecutor executed a search warrant at your home. At that time, several subpoenas issued to your aides. 2 of your associates pleaded guilty in 2008 to tax charges and cooperated with the prosecutor's investigation. So during all this, ultimately, you were indicted by a Baltimore grand jury on 12 counts, 4 counts of perjury, 2 counts of misconduct, 3 counts of theft, and 3 counts of fraudulent misappropriations. Now, there were also counts that were also dropped, wouldn't come forward, such things like that. Also, charges that the jury wasn't able to reach a unanimous decision regarding final charges. So this ultimately led to your resignation as mayor in 2010. Do you feel that the charges were fair? Did you feel you were targeted?
Well, this situation goes back even before then,
Okay.
when there was a federal prosecutor who was going after myself and the city council, a Republican federal prosecutor. And some emails actually got exposed that somebody got access to that showed that he was trying to go after us.
Okay.
And the biggest piece of this whole scenario is when we do TIFs and pilots in the city and people get an extended tax period to paying the taxes, a lot of big developers. One of the things that I couldn't require it, but I expected to see at the Board of Estimates, or before it came to the Board of Estimates, those development projects having an equity partner.
Okay.
Where they would involve African Americans. And this was when I was city council president because I chaired the Board of Estimates. It was during that time when those requirements or suggestions were made to make sure, people talk about Mayor Barry in D.C. and what he was able to do for African Americans, and they speak about Maynard Jackson in Atlanta, and what he was able to do at the airport. Well, we had an opportunity to really have African American companies, developers, really expand and grow. So Harbor East, H&H, Mr. Patarakis and others, people did get the message as far as opening up to African Americans to be partners with them.
Okay.
That was really the beginning of this investigation. The federal prosecutor, some emails got exposed that he was definitely targeting us. That was dropped, and luckily, I don't hang out at cocktail receptions that attorneys and judges and them hang out at. I wish I had been. I was told, this was after the fact, I was like, why are people telling me after the facts that tell me before? That the federal prosecutor told the state prosecutor to go after myself and an individual I was involved with. And so the overall mistake in that whole process is not disclosing. I should have disclosed a relationship.
Okay.
And
that was a professional, personal relationship when you say
well,
someone
it was
you were
personal.
involved
It
with?
was personal, and it was personal, but they wanted to also make it professional.
Okay.
Even though that's why the two cases, the one that deals with the perjury and the one deals with the gift cards, that's why they didn't do the perjury one first and they did the gift cards first.
Okay.
Because of this personal and professional relationship that I had, that if I had to disclose this relationship, I probably would have retired last session,
Okay.
last 4 years. But so that's the basis of it, and somebody's doing a documentary on me, and they probably have more information than anybody.
Okay.
But they seem to not be able to get any money to finish the documentary. But so we'll see what happens. And I probably need to write a book. But the bottom line is, going through that process for me, it didn't destroy me because I still continued to do my job as mayor. But it really made. It affected me, that it affected my family and
Yes.
the people who believed in me.
Absolutely.
And the fact that disclosing it, it would not have gone through that process. And for them to spend the amount of money that they spent to take me through that. So I think I was targeted, but I also should have known better not, to have disclosed it,
Yeah.
the relationship.
Yeah.
And the gifts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, we see a history of it. Some people say, when it comes to black women in particular and politicians seem to get caught up in maybe not knowing exactly.
I don't know if it's not knowing. I think it's a matter of, and I can't speak about anybody else's case, but knowing, that no matter, that you have to cross every T and dot every I.
Yes, indeed.
Because even through that process, which never came out, the families that I took care of, that we took care of for Christmas, nobody ever mentions that. And I'm talking about hundreds of families.
Right.
Nobody mentioned that the process started when I was city council president. And as soon as I learned, that I had not disclosed things, I ended up disclosing everything. Like, if somebody gave me an ink pen, I disclosed it.
Okay.
No matter how small or how large. But none of that even came out either.
Gotcha.
But, it was rough. It was rough.
I can imagine so. So at the end of this all, 4 years probation, required community service, and donations that you've made since, that were part of the agreement, the donations that you had to make, agreeing to sell any gifts that you received at the time. So you would think that at the end of this all, you might go cower in a corner somewhere, right?
Well, I did. I did when I left office in 2010, and we had that big snowstorm. That was
Okay.
like 21 inches? I did. I had to go buy a car, and at that time, I ended up leaving public office. I was glad my daughter was away. Mm-hmm. My son was here, and he was like my angel. Mm-hmm. And I also got menopause. So it was.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm. It was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to therapy, everything.
Emotionally, mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But, you could have said, well, all right, Sheila's done. That's it for me.
Well, on top of it, they wanted to make sure that I did not run. The prosecutor made sure that I could not run the next
During a certain period.
term. Yeah,
Right.
and that was intentional.
Right. Right. So, well,
Not that I don't know if I would have run or not.
I was going to ask if that wasn't on the table, would you have been?
I might have.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Okay.
I doubt it, but who knows?
So you
I
ran
might have
again.
done it just to be spiteful of those who were trying to take me down.
Okay. Would you have been ready?
I might have been. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe a question that really can't be answered, right? Mm-hmm. So you run again in 2016, election for mayor of Baltimore, only lost by a small margin to Catherine Pugh, who at the time was endorsed by Congressman Elijah Cummings. Pugh had 37% of the vote. You had 35% of the vote. And then the 2020 election comes, and you run again, losing by a narrow margin to the city's current mayor, Brandon Scott. Why do you think that despite the legal issues, despite the scandal, despite the trial and everything that happened in 2009, that people still come out in droves to support and vote for Sheila Dixon?
I think it's because people know of my love and commitment to the city. People know that when I served as mayor and city council president, that they saw more results than they've seen since, and that they know that I was able to get a handle on, some challenges. I mean, you never know how many people you actually help because you just help people and you don't keep a record of it. I don't keep a record of it anyway. And I think people generally know that my commitment and love for the city. In running in 2016 against Catherine, when people say that only Trump is the main one who said it. Well, there's a couple other people about votes being stolen. I believe that, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
I do, because there was a lot of underhanded things that went down as relates to voting, and then things that we've even exposed. But we did the right, and I knew I wasn't going to win because once, you get elected as a Democrat, but no one has ever gotten as many write-in votes. And this is where you have to write the person's name in.
Right.
Than during that general election that I got. But I think it's people know that the love and commitment I have for this city, and I was getting things done. And that a lot of those things have not happened since then.
Okay. And now your take on the current state of affairs
I
here
had
in
no
Baltimore.
intentions of running. I really did not. I like my private life. But for the last 4 years, and I've actually tried to work with Brandon, Mayor Scott, advising him. He took my advice on one thing, but in general, I would have made a great city administrator, even though I didn't vote for that, because I don't believe we needed a city administrator. I think the deputy mayor process worked. But I could have really helped him out a lot.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he went another route. But people have stopped me, drive up next to their car, in the elevator, in the supermarket, begging me to run. And then recently I had people who said that they would do whatever it took to help me in this election. And so I had a lot of people twisting my arms to do this. And so we'll see what happens. It's in God's hand and the voters' hands.
So that's what changed your mind?
Because I wasn't. I was not. But I did check with my children first and foremost. My son is like my go for it. My daughter was kind of selfish, didn't want me to because she doesn't want to live in Baltimore City. She lives in New York, and they're moving back to Maryland.
Okay.
And she feels if I'm mayor, she has to live in the city. I tell you, you live where you want to live.
Right.
I said, now, you grew up in the city. I'm disappointed you don't want to live in the city, but we've lost population.
Yeah.
And the fact that even my own daughter doesn't want to live in Baltimore City.
Yeah.
We got to reverse that. I want, her and other young people to want to raise their families here in the city.
Yeah. So you say a lot of people were coming to you saying, listen, we will do whatever we can to get you back in office. Who have been the major supporters, the major funders, the major contributors, endorsers of your campaign this time around?
Actually, I don't necessarily rely on endorsements. I've had a couple, Eric Costello, who is a councilman in the 11th. Sandy Rosenberg, Delegate Sandy Rosenberg has endorsed me. I have some more that are coming down the pipe, but I have a cross-section of people who support me as far as helping to raise money, from grassroots to people in the business community. So it's a really cross-section of people.
Yeah.
People who don't necessarily live here, but they might have businesses here, but they're also committed to Baltimore City. They want to see the best for Baltimore City.
Okay. And why does Baltimore City, in its current state today, need Sheila Dixon back in office?
Baltimore, in its current state, needs Sheila Dixon back because we need to get back to what the business of city government is. And we need to do it in a way where, we also, where I and others also work with young people who want to get into public office, but realize that when something's working, you build on it. Mm-hmm. You don't throw it away because it's somebody else's idea, because ultimately you get the credit. And so we need some consistency in a way that is going to make great impact. And we have to bring everybody to the table. And we can't just verbally say that. I mean, we need to show that everybody from every walk of life needs to be part of the process, because city government has basic fundamental responsibilities. We need to have the city safe. We need to make sure our streets are clean and our roads. Driving up here was a bumpy ride. We need to make sure that our schools are operating and functioning. We need to make sure our water is safe.
Absolutely.
And so those are basic fundamental things that city government is supposed to do. And then we're supposed to work with the private sector and our nonprofits to deal with some of the systemic things that impact us, to attract businesses in Baltimore, to keep businesses here. I was driving from an event from downtown, Shop Leadenhall, the woman that I shared with you, 104, Maddie Hudson. So many businesses coming up Charles and Calvert Street, coming out this way, are closed. Small restaurants, different stores that have been open, and so we've got to do a better job in helping those small businesses so that they can be successful and succeed. And we need them here in the city.
Absolutely. We talked about a lot.
Yeah, we did.
Did we leave anything out?
No, you left out some really big stuff. As far as when you ask who is Sheila, part of what drives me is trying to live a healthy, a balanced life. That's why I work out a lot during COVID. When people were gaining weight being home, my trainer had the gym outside, and we actually lost weight. Mm-hmm. I've always been a healthy eater, and most of the time we all have our times when we don't. But I ended up incorporating some different diet concepts that have helped me, like intermittent fasting. But health for me is very key.
Yeah.
And this is the season where we're with our families a lot, and this is where we, and particularly the African American community, has to focus on, and that is discussing different illnesses that run in our families so that we can do some preventive measures, and really focusing on the families and our health. That for me is first and foremost. If we have a healthy city, can you imagine? We have all these renowned hospitals and institutions. We should be the healthiest city in America. We're number 3 as far as stress in the country. We're number 1 as far as dementia, Baltimore City and Prince George's County. I just got another statistic, hepatitis C, which ultimately can cause liver and other issues. We're extremely high in that area, which is a silent disease that people walk around don't know they even have it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the condition of HIV and AIDS are now here in the city. That was a big piece for me because of losing a brother to AIDS. So that's huge.
Yeah.
And that's a real focus. No matter what I'm doing, I'm going to be engaged and involved in that.
Absolutely. Anything else we didn't discuss?
No, I think that's it.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for your contributions to history, your contributions to Baltimore, and just know that whatever happens beyond today, that the contributions that you've made thus far have been felt, seen, and appreciated. So we really appreciate you, Sheila Dixon, for stopping by the To Be More podcast. Thank you for sharing your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I had a great time and great conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, if you missed any episodes of the To Be More podcast, all you have to do is log on WMAR2news.com. I'm Erica Kane. Thanks so much for watching.